A retired mafia boss, a talented private detective who specialized in researching criminal psychology, a female reporter who risked her life to rush into a criminal den to solve a case, a strange forensic doctor who ate and slept with corpses, and a veteran police officer who was not afraid of heaven or earth. The combination of these 5 strange people created a top-notch crime-solving team. The nickname of this crime-solving team was the Mad Dog Squad. Once the Mad Dog Squad appeared, the criminals were all scared and ran away. Today, let's join them on this Mad Dog Squad's crazy crime-solving journey. In Korea at that time, there was a very scary force, an organization that specialized in hunting people. The target of the human hunting organization was women driving luxury cars. After blackmailing, they began to destroy the bodies. Nightfall was the most appropriate time to act. An unfortunate girl became the target of this manhunt organization. The news immediately reported her disappearance, but the next night, a similar case occurred. A girl was walking in the underground parking lot. There had been many murders recently, so the girl was a bit scared. Feeling that someone was following her, the girl started to walk faster, but no matter how fast she walked, she still could not escape the kidnappers' clutches. Immediately after that, the girl was captured and taken to a strange place, where she repeatedly begged them not to take her life. Because the luxury car had only been rented, the girl herself was in debt, and even the clothes on her body were cheap sale items. After checking the information, the kidnappers confirmed that the girl's name was Moo Young, and what Moo Young had said was true. That day was truly an unlucky day for the kidnappers, because they had kidnapped the wrong person. The kidnappers had originally intended to sell Moo Young to the rich. However, because Moo Young's reputation was not very good, they dug a hole to bury her to cover up the evidence. Moo Young's friend, Tak Won, was trying to film everything. Just as Tak Won was about to report to the police, he was discovered by the kidnappers. Soon after, Tak Won was also taken to the boss. In case of a dangerous situation like this, Tak Won had prepared an electric baton. However, there were too many of them, so Tak Won was at a disadvantage. Fortunately, Kang Ho appeared at that moment. Kang Ho was one of the best police officers in the area. No one should have underestimated Kang Ho just because he looked shabby. When it came to punching and kicking, no one was his match. Each and every one of them who rushed forward was punched unconscious by Kang Ho on the spot. Even a thick wooden stick Kang Ho could block with his bare hands. At that moment, a loud sound was heard, then a kidnapper fell from the upper floor. Teddy Jung appeared with an impeccable, cool presence. Teddy Jung was a retired gang boss. Each of Teddy Jung's powerful punches left the kidnappers unable to react. Teddy Jung's underlings were also highly skilled in martial arts. Quickly handling the scum, the boss tried to escape but was stopped by Kang Ho. The boss didn't listen to gentle words, so Kang Ho had to take action again. Thus, a formidable organization was captured. However, not only was Kang Ho not rewarded, but he was also reprimanded by his superiors, because Kang Ho had acted on his own. To avoid responsibility, Kang Ho waved his powerful black card, hoping that his boss would let him off the hook this time. After that, Kang Ho went straight to the interrogation room to ask Tak Won and Moo Young for information. However, the cunning Moo Young set a condition. If Kang Ho wanted information, he had to agree to Moo Young's exclusive coverage of the case. In order to understand the criminal's methods of committing crimes, Kang Ho agreed to Moo Young's condition. But as soon as he got the information, Kang Ho went back on his word. Kang Ho and his headquarters held a press conference to spread information about the case. This caused all of Moo Young's efforts to go down the drain. Moo Young also held a grudge against Kang Ho because of this. At the same time, the subordinates called Kang Ho, curiously asking if he could handle all the thugs by himself. Kang Ho then showed off that dealing with those thugs was just a daily routine. Immediately after that, Kang Ho headed to a small bar in town. This small bar was actually protected by Kang Ho. Teddy Jung was very grateful to Kang Ho, so whenever Kang Ho needed help, Teddy Jung would immediately take action. However, before the old case could calm down, another brutal case arose. Disaster was about to strike this teacher. Just as the teacher stopped to look around, a man in black suddenly rushed out from behind. Before the teacher could react, the man had already stabbed him with a knife. After that, the murderer left the murder weapon with fingerprints at the scene and left. It was also at this place, 13 years earlier, that a high school student had been brutally murdered by the murderer with a hammer. Then, the murderer had also left the murder weapon at the scene and left. Thus, the two methods of committing the crime in the two cases were the same. The murderer had intentionally left the murder weapon at the scene. The scene of the teacher's murder in the park was also depicted as a painting hanging in Tak Won's private detective office. But Tak Won's face did not look like that of a murderer at all. Tak Won was only good at making jokes with Moo Young every day, because the boss had threatened to fire Moo Young if the viewership did not increase. She had no choice but to seek out Tak Won for business cooperation. Tak Won was in charge of analyzing criminal behavior. Since Tak Won had been a psychologist, each scene was very realistic. Tak Won deduced that the murderer was cruel and unable to control anger. The murderer had used a hammer to hit a high school student in the head more than 40 times and had left a weapon with his fingerprints at the scene of the crime. What made people even more suspicious was that the murderer had also cut off the victim's wrist and intentionally shown it to people. Tak Won speculated that this might have been a warning from the murderer. Moo Young asked Tak Won if the murderer murderer was someone the victim knew, Takwon replied that he was both an acquaintance and not an acquaintance. This made Mu-young think of something. Immediately after, Mu-young went to see the mother of the student who had been murdered that year, asking to interview the victim's daily life in order to secretly investigate who the suspect could be. While checking the victim's computer, Mu-young suddenly remembered the description in Takwon's case file. Takwon assumed that the murderer was an online friend who was very familiar with the victim but had never met him. So Mu-young opened the student's social media and began investigating. Sure enough, Mu-young found a suspicious social media account. During the investigation, Kang-ho also discovered that before he was murdered, the high school teacher had called a phone number more than 100 times, but no one answered. So Kang-ho decided to investigate the owner of this phone number. Soon, both Mu-young and Kang-ho narrowed down the target. The target was a man named Sang-baek who opened a clinic, but when Kang-ho arrived at Sang-baek's clinic, suddenly a group of men in suits carrying weapons came out. Kang-ho was not afraid when he saw this. Kang-ho told the men in suits to come here, as many as there were. At this moment, Tae-jung's team also arrived. Under the good coordination of Tae-jung and Kang-ho, each man in suits was beaten to a pulp. Seeing that the situation was not good, Sang-baek immediately fled, but on the way, he accidentally bumped into Mu-young. For a living, Mu-young risked her life and crashed the bike into Sang-baek's face. Because of that, Mu-young successfully stalled for time, waiting until Kang-ho ran up and gave Sang-baek a fatal punch that left him unable to fight back. Afterwards, Kang-ho and Mu-young took Sang-baek to the rooftop for questioning and found out that Sang-baek was not the murderer. That year, Sang-baek had witnessed the entire process of the middle school student being murdered in the park, but because his eyesight was poor at night, he could not see the murderer's face clearly. Afraid of bringing trouble upon himself, Sang-baek did not report it to the police. However, he knew absolutely nothing about the murder of teacher. Having obtained the necessary information, Mu-young left and Kang-ho sent Sang-baek back to headquarters. Kang-ho and Mu-young both vaguely sensed that the same person was responsible for both cases. Mu-young decided to act first. She went to find Takwon and went with him to see forensic doctor Pan-suk. After Pan-suk examined the body of the murdered teacher, he quickly came to a conclusion based on the stab wounds on the body. The stab wounds were all from left to right. Furthermore, both cases had similarities, so it could be concluded that the murderer was left-handed. In addition, both bodies were severely damaged before death. On this side, Kang-ho compared the fingerprints on the evidence of the two cases and also came to a conclusion. The fingerprints on the murder weapon of both cases came from the same person. This meant that the unsolved murder case from 13 years ago and the murder of the teacher were both committed by the same murderer. On the way out, Kang-ho met Mu-young's group again. They were like cats and dogs, and they started to mock to each other as soon as they met, not knowing that they would become a close group later on. Kang-ho interrogated Sang-baek again. At first, Sang-baek was still acting like a scoundrel, but when faced with this kind of person, Kang-ho had his own way. He said that Sang-baek had practiced medicine without a license for 5 years, plus the crime of soliciting a minor to use drugs, which would carry a sentence of at least 15 years in prison, not to mention other crimes. Kang-ho also threatened that Sang-baek might have to celebrate his 70th birthday in prison. The policeman sitting next to him also added that Sang-baek had also committed theft and human trafficking. Hearing this, Sang-baek began to feel scared and finally opened his mouth. He confessed that before he was murdered, the teacher had gone to a nightclub to look for his student, but there, the teacher had an argument with a VIP customer of the nightclub. Following this clue, Kang-ho met the nightclub owner to ask to review the surveillance video from that night, but this nightclub owner was also a stubborn person. Kang-ho continued to show his extensive investigative experience. He went into the kitchen, kicked over the trash can, took a picture of it, then accused the nightclub of violating food safety and was fined 110,000 won. Next, Kang-ho took out a bag of expired sausages from his pocket, put it in the nightclub's refrigerator, took a picture. Then he accused the nightclub owner of selling expired food and was fined 90 days. In the end, the nightclub owner couldn't take it anymore and had to tell the whole story of that night. On this side, Mu-young was not to be outdone either. Mu-young found a surveillance camera in the park. In it, the image of the murderer was revealed. Coincidentally, Kang-ho's subordinate had also found the image of the murderer. Comparing it with the information of VIP guests at the bar, it was indeed the same person. The next day, when the suspect just stepped out, Mu-young, who had been on standby, approached him to interview him about the recent case. He was Min-seok. Min-seok was the son of a tycoon from a Korean pharmaceutical manufacturing group. Immediately after, Kang-ho stopped Min-seok at the company's door and took him to the police station for interrogation. But unexpectedly, after Min-seok arrived at the police station, he became extremely arrogant. What Kang-ho had not expected was that Kang-ho's superior was extremely respectful to Min-seok. The superior had even kept apologizing to Min-seok. So Kang-ho was immediately called out to be questioned. Before Kang-ho could explain, he was kicked in the leg. But a man who hated crime like Kang-ho had no intention of letting Min-seok go. When the superior called Kang-ho out to ask him something, Kang-ho secretly took the cup that Min-seok had drunk from. Afterwards, Kang-ho gave it to the forensic department to have it tested for fingerprints. If the fingerprints on the cup matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon, then it would be possible to prove that Min-seok was the murderer. But when the results of the test came out, Kang-ho was completely stunned. Min-seok's fingerprints and the fingerprints on the murder weapon did not match at all. Not only did they fail to catch the murderer, Kang-ho also offended Min-seok and was suspended from his post for 3 months. But Kang-ho believed that his investigation was not wrong. At this time, looking at the video that Moo-young recorded, Tak-won immediately realized something was wrong. Based on the wound on the victim's body, the murderer was left-handed, but in the video, Min-seok was right-handed. At this point, Tak-won began to understand the key problem, which was that Min-seok had a twin brother. At the same time, Kang-ho also discovered this problem. It turned out that Min-seok had a twin younger brother named Min-soo. Although they were born just 1 minute apart, their birth certificates were issued 2 days apart. The police could not identify the murderer's fingerprints because Min-seok designated the fingerprint identification on behalf of his younger brother. That night, Kang-ho was already waiting in front of the suspect's house, and Moo-young had also followed him all the way there. However, the noise of Moo-young and Kang-ho alerted the security guard, and fortunately, Moo-young's subordinates had prepared a car outside. Thus, Moo-young and Kang-ho were lucky to escape a disaster, bringing the secretly filmed video back to headquarters. The latest technology had analyzed the suspect's movements to match the movements of the murderer at the crime scene. Moo-young immediately ordered her subordinates to prepare the content for the newspaper, just waiting for the exhibition with the participation of the Min-seok and Min-soo brothers to take place. The Moo-young group would be the first newspaper to report on this case. At Min-soo's art exhibition, the guards initially aggressively blocked the way, but were soon beaten up by Kang-ho. Outside, Teddy Jung and his men also dealt with Min-soo's reinforcements. The outside group completed their mission excellently. The inside group did not disappoint either. Next, Tak-won began to analyze the crimes of the two brothers, Min-seok and Min-soo. Min-seok used his hand to confirm his fingerprints twice. Min-seok verified his fingerprints and those of his younger brother Min-soo. Therefore, at the crime scene, the police could not confirm the fingerprints of the perpetrator, and because his fingerprints were not identified, the perpetrator brazenly left a weapon with his fingerprints at the crime scene. Afterwards, Kang-ho also brought out evidence. Min-seok's fingerprints appeared on both the brothers' identification documents, so Kang-ho sent Min-seok and Min-soo away for questioning. However, Min-soo seemed to have anticipated this, so Min-soo scratched his own fingerprints. Because of that, the DNA could not produce the desired results. The police chief saw that Kang-ho was suspended but still questioned Min-soo, so the police chief scolded Kang-ho. But then the police chief quietly left and decided to trust Kang-ho once more. The police were having a hard time. Even after taking fingerprints countless times, they could not produce results. The 48-hour arrest ended. Min-soo was pleased and was about to leave, but at this moment, Kang-ho took out the results of the examination. Min-soo's fingerprints were exactly the same as the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Min-soo was very surprised when he heard this. It turned out that even if the fingerprints were destroyed, they would not completely disappear. Within 48 hours, the wound on the epidermis would gradually heal. Therefore, the fingerprints would also reappear. After taking and comparing the fingerprints many times, the fingerprints were completely identical to the fingerprints on the murder weapon. The Min-seok and Min-soo brothers, just like that, they got themselves into trouble, so the two murder cases were solved. Finally, the media reported that the murderer was arrested. The chiefs who had been backing the Min-seok and Min-soo brothers were also imprisoned one after another. The next morning, Kang-ho went to the hospital. Kang-ho used a large sum of money to take care of the victim's family. After this case, Moo-young was highly praised by her boss, but Kang-ho was suspended, so the credit for solving the case was given to someone else. At night, Kang-ho went to find a bald old man in the alley. Kang-ho coldly warned the bald old man, "Stay right here." What secret is Kang-ho hiding? The next morning, a prisoner transport vehicle was suddenly hit by a truck at an intersection. This prisoner transport vehicle was full of vicious murderers. The prisoner Mickey, who was involved in the serial murder case, was also on the vehicle. After that strong collision, almost everyone on the vehicle died. Mickey saw his chance and staggered towards the unconscious prison guard. Mickey took out the key and opened the handcuffs himself. After that, Mickey also gave the key to his cellmate Kang-soo. Very quickly, news of the two murderers, Mickey and Kang-soo, escaping broke out. All of Seoul was in a state of panic. Sure enough, that same night, a woman named Sunny became the victim. Under Kang-ho's observation, the murderer was definitely Mickey, a dangerous criminal who had just escaped. The woman named Sunny got off work and was followed by a murderer. Sunny had just returned home when she was attacked by the murderer. Surprisingly, after killing the victim, the murderer also put Sunny in the bathtub and left a butterfly mark on Sunny's neck. Other than that, no evidence was found at the scene. Even the surveillance system in the hallway was completely cut off. Many years ago, the murderer had killed 4 victims in a row. After killing the victim, the murderer had always left a butterfly mark on the victim. Moreover, all the victims were women. The same goes for this victim. From the subject to the way the murderer committed the crime, there were similarities with the previous cases. There was no doubt that the murderer was Mickey. When the superiors found out, they immediately held an emergency meeting and criticized the prisoner escort team for their poor performance. The The crimes that this murderer had committed were countless. All the victims were brutally murdered. They all had a butterfly mark on their bodies. The murderer had left that mark to challenge the police. That was why the police chief was furious. He ordered everyone to quickly capture this cruel murderer. Everyone who heard that solving the case would be treated to a buffet applauded happily. Immediately after, everyone got to work. At this time, Daejin suddenly discovered a burn scar on the suspect's hand. At the same time, Moo Young was interviewing the prison warden. The prison warden also honestly said that Mickey was a freak. Be careful when investigating the evil Mickey. At night, Kang Ho's former subordinate Tai Sung came to threaten Teddy Jung. Tai Sung said he would level the place to do housing business. Recalling the glorious past of Teddy Jung's group, Teddy Jung's group was a notorious gang. They could rule a vast neighborhood with just 3 members. Now that Teddy Jung had retired, Tai Sung no longer held his former boss in high regard. Tai Sung followed the money and wealth and forgot the gratitude to the person who had taken care of Tai Sung, Teddy Jung. On this side, after taking mother home, Kang Ho suddenly discovered that his mother had rented the warehouse to someone else. Coincidentally, it was Moo Young, the person Kang Ho hated the most. Kang Ho's mother quickly explained the family's expenses were in deficit, so she rented it to Moo Young to earn a little extra money. At this point, Kang Ho couldn't do anything else, so Kang Ho had to live with the person he hated the most under the same roof. The next morning, the subordinates gave Moo Young more information about the escape of the 2 criminals. Comparing it with the previous butterfly cases, Moo Young discovered that the victims all had something in common, so Moo Young immediately went to the police station to ask for an interview. But there were too many reporters lined up, so Moo Young disguised herself as a delivery man or a janitor, but all of them were ineffective. Later, when Kang Ho realized Moo Young was there, Kang Ho made a face and sarcastically refused to let Moo Young in. However, during the fight, Moo Young successfully put a wiretap in Kang Ho's pocket. Because of that, Moo Young was able to eavesdrop on all the confidential information. Knowing that Kang Ho was going to the post office to check the contact information of the murderer, Moo Young shamelessly climbed into the car to go with him. A few minutes later, they checked the cameras of the whole city. Looking at the frame, the person who appeared was Tak Won. At first, Kang Ho thought that Tak Won was the suspect, but when he lifted Tak Won's hand, there was no burn scar. At that time, Tak Won made a hypothesis based on the crime scenes. Each detail was described in such detail that Kang Ho was a bit surprised. However, Tak Won's face looked very arrogant, so Kang Ho still didn't believe him. Because Tak Won thought that the police were investigating in the wrong direction, the butterfly case and the Sunny case were not caused by the same person. Moreover, Tak Won also thought that Mickey was not the real murderer and that Mickey was being wronged. Back at the headquarters, Daejin also informed Kang Ho. When the murder happened, the murderer was bitten on the hand by the victim. At the same time, Daejin also provided a video of the fugitive Mickey appearing. Following that clue, Kang Ho went to find the shop owner. The shop owner confirmed that Mickey looked very suspicious that day. Even though he was wearing a hat and covered his body, the shop owner still recognized that he was the wanted criminal. With this information, Kang Ho ordered Daejin to search the surrounding cameras to find Mickey's whereabouts. Since Tak Won's whereabouts were also very suspicious, Kang Ho passed all his suspicions to Tak Won, so Kang Ho ordered the police force to arrange around Tak Won's house to monitor Tak Won's every move to see if there was anything suspicious. However, Tak Won had been an inspector before, so at first glance, Tak Won knew he was being followed. Seeing this, Tak Won was not afraid at all and even went over to tease Kang Ho. After all, Tak Won was not the murderer. Tak Won had been cheated of his deposit before. When Tak Won moved in, he discovered that the place was a private residence. Feeling sorry for the boy who had just come from the countryside, the landlady allowed Tak Won to stay with her son. After all, the police were very trustworthy, and the landlady's son was named Mickey, also the serial killer who had just escaped. That day, on the landlady's birthday, everyone had not been happy for long when the police rushed in and arrested Mickey. Mickey was mistaken for the murderer of the butterfly murder case. Because he could not defend Mickey, Tak Won blamed himself and resigned as an inspector. At the same time, Kang Ho relied on the most advanced technology, while Moo Young relied on forensic Dr. Pan So. Both discovered the shape left behind by the culprit, which perfectly matched the butterfly pattern from previous cases. Immediately, Kang Ho and Moo Young brought the information back to inform their teammates. At this moment, Daejin rushed in to announce that the butterfly case had a new victim. It turned out that last night, Kang Soo, who was also the escape prisoner with Mickey, was attacked. It turned out that Kang Soo was the murderer who had killed the girl Sunny and put her in the bathtub. Just as Kang Soo was bandaging the victim's bitten arm, Kang Soo was suddenly killed by someone. After finishing, the murderer had left a butterfly tattoo on Kang Soo's neck. Then, the murderer threw Kang Soo's body into the trash. Kang Ho immediately rushed to investigate the scene, but when he arrived, the police did not let Kang Ho in. It turned out that police chief had suspended Kang Ho for acting on his own, so Kang Ho had no choice but to join forces with Moo Young's group to solve the case. A few minutes later, Kang Ho brought a pile of documents about previous butterfly cases to Dr. Pan Suk's office. Strangely, the place was so dark that it was scary. Even the compartment where the body was kept ringing. Seeing this, Kang Ho slowly walked over to check. Suddenly, Takwon came out of nowhere, causing Mu Young and Kanho to have heart attacks. After that, Takwon calmly opened the door to the body compartment. Dr. Pansuk suddenly crawled out. It turned out that after working with corpses for so long, Dr. Pansuk had developed a passion for sleeping in the corpse's place. When Takwon calmed down, he meticulously analyzed the recent cases, which all had something in common. At the same time, Pansuk also showed the brain scans of the victims. Pansuk confirmed that all the cases had been caused by the same murder weapon. Therefore, the wounds left in the skulls were the same. In addition, the handprints on the victims' necks also had strange shapes. They were the marks of people with short thumbs, but in the recent case, the handprints were very different. This proved that the murderer who had killed Kang-soo was someone else. The murderer who had killed Kang-soo was just impersonating the butterfly killer. Hearing this, Kanho immediately turned his suspicions to Mickey, but Takwon immediately defended him because Mickey had been with Takwon last night. This was the most accurate alibi. After being released from prison, Mickey had learned that his mother had died, so Mickey went to Takwon and cursed him. Mickey questioned why Takwon had not informed him about his mother's death. Hearing this, Takwon said that it had been his mother's last wish, as she did not want Mickey to suffer while in prison. After that, Takwon had even carefully kept watch on the police to help Mickey escape. Once they had gathered enough information, the four of them formed an underground investigation team. The expenses were to be fully covered by Kanho. After hearing this, everyone clapped in joy and left. Mu Young and Takwon even treated Kanho like their personal driver, asking him to give them a ride to save on taxi fares. The next morning, Mu Young brought the information collected the previous day to her subordinates. Mu Young stated that Mickey was not the murderer who had killed Kang-soo. Now they had to start looking for other clues. Just at that moment, Mu Young's useless younger brother suddenly showed up. Every month, he would come to Mu Young to ask for money. No matter how much Mu Young refused, her younger brother would always find a loophole. In the end, Mu Young had no choice but to give in to his request. Meanwhile, based on the information provided by Daejin and trace evidence analysis, Kanho was certain that the murderer was a man. Later, Kanho and Takwon went to the hospital to question the victim's doctor, asking if anyone suspicious had been following the victim during treatment. After that, Kanho requested access to the medical records. There, Kanho and Takwon were shocked to discover that all the victims of the butterfly case had once been patients at this hospital. The first victim in the butterfly murderer case was a bank employee, the second was a hospital nurse, the third was a civil servant, the fourth was a lawyer. From these seemingly unrelated people, Kanho found a common point. The victims were all patients at the same hospital. The doctor who treated the victims was Jang Dong-gun. But when asked about Jang Dong-gun's whereabouts, Dr. Mina, Jang Dong-gun's colleague, said that Jang Dong-gun had passed away due to illness. On the other side, Teddy Jung was attending Kang-soo's funeral. It turned out that Kang-soo used to be Teddy Jung's junior. Surprisingly, Mu Young was also at the funeral. Mu Young wanted to interview Teddy Jung to get more information about Kang-soo's case. At the same time, Mu Young revealed that the murderer of Kang-soo was not the butterfly murderer, but someone else. Mu Young then asks Teddy Jung if Kang-soo has a grudge against anyone. Teddy Jung replied that he had many grudges, because when Teddy Jung's gang broke up, Kang-soo asked to be Prosecutor Kim's henchman. Kang-soo did illegal things for Prosecutor Kim to make money. After hearing this, Mu Young boldly went to see Prosecutor Kim, but when he heard Kang-soo's name, Prosecutor Kim's face immediately changed. After that, Prosecutor Kim left without saying a word. However, the next day, a witness came to see Mu Young. There, the witness provided a videotape that was accidentally recorded in the case of a worker's death at the factory. According to the witness, the worker was murdered, not due to an occupational accident according to Prosecutor Kim. At the same time, Pan Seok was using all kinds of objects to strike the artificial skull. His goal was to identify the murder weapon used by the butterfly murderer. Meanwhile, Takwon presented a document proving that the suspect Jang Dong-gun had died. Immediately, Kanho and Takwon went to Jang Dong-gun's house to investigate further. There, Jang Dong-gun's younger brother, Yoo Huin, panicked as soon as he saw the police. Kanho frantically chased after him, but was ambushed and painfully subdued. In the end, Kanho was unable to stop Yoo Huin from escaping before he could question him. However, Takwon discovered an important clue. Jang Dong-gun's room was decorated with countless butterflies. At the same time, a picture frame on the cabinet contained a photograph of the doctor they had met the day before. This led Kanho and Takwon to assume that the doctor was Jang Dong-gun's wife. The reason she had lied was to protect Jang Dong-gun. Meanwhile, Mu Young had found an alibi for Kang-soo. Mu Young discovered that on the day the worker had been killed, Kang-soo had been celebrating a festival in Hawaii. This revealed that Prosecutor Kim had used Kang-soo as a pawn. Kang-soo had spent 15 years in prison in place of Prosecutor Kim. Fearing that Kang-soo would escape and expose him, Prosecutor Kim had ordered Tai-sung to eliminate Kang-soo. When Teddy Jung found out, he became furious. At the same time, Kang-ho's group also discovered that Mickey was planning to take revenge on those who had harmed him and caused his mother's suffering and death. The police officer who had arrested Mickey at that time was Police Officer Park. Police Officer Park was at the hospital taking care of his son who had just had surgery. Immediately, Kang-ho and Takwon arrived to stop stop Mickey's actions. However, it seemed that Mickey had arrived first. Taking advantage of the moment when Police Officer Park went out to answer the phone, Mickey suddenly attacked with a knife. Police Officer Park could only run away to save his life. Luckily, Kang-ho's team also discovered this scene. At the same time, Teddy Jung's group was heading to the construction site to take revenge on Tae-sung for killing Kang-soo. Moo-young also followed along to film for the newspaper. Unfortunately, Teddy Jung left in such a hurry that he forgot to bring his asthma inhaler. Teddy Jung had severe asthma and could only fight with all his might. On Kang-ho and Tak-won's side, in order to prevent Mickey from making a mistake, Kang-ho and Tak-won rushed over to stop him, but at this time, the police also appeared. While Tak-won was advising Mickey became extremely angry and rushed towards Tak-won. The police, not understanding what was going on, immediately opened fire without hesitation, but the bullet that was originally aimed at Mickey was taken by Tak-won instead. Seeing Tak-won fall to the ground, Mickey could not bear it any longer and rushed forward. Even Kang-ho could not stop him. In the end, Mickey was shot in the stomach by the police. A few minutes later, Mickey and Tak-won were quickly taken to the hospital. However, the police chief was very happy when he received the news that Kang-ho had caught Mickey. Although Kang-ho tried to explain that Mickey was not the culprit, the police chief did not seem to believe Kang-ho's words. At this time, Teddy Jung's group was also beaten up. Everyone was only at full strength at the beginning, but without the strength of the boss, it was like an eagle with broken wings. Moo-young's camera was also smashed. Moo-young was almost beaten up. Luckily, Tae-sung didn't want to hit women, so he stopped his juniors. At the same time, the public security chief was holding a press conference, announcing that the serial murderer Mickey had been arrested. This didn't make Kang-ho happy at all, because Kang-ho knew that the murderer of the butterfly murder case was not Mickey. The next day, Teddy Jung and his juniors were discharged from the hospital. Before leaving, Teddy Jung sent all the hospital bills to Moo-young to pay. Seeing this, Moo-young was a bit shocked, but it was Moo-young who had incited Teddy Jung to beat up Tae-sung, so Moo-young had to pay the huge hospital bills. Seeing the juniors being beaten up, Teddy Jung immediately apologized to his juniors and announced the disbandment of the team. I thought this was a touching story, but as soon as Teddy Jung finished speaking, his juniors left without any regret. At this time, the police station was also celebrating the capture of Mickey. All the police had gone out to eat and drink. No one noticed Kang-ho, who was sad alone, because Kang-ho did not have enough evidence to find the real culprit. But Kang-ho did not have much time left to find out. Afterwards, Kang-ho went to Jang Dong-gun's house to search. Here, Kang-ho discovered women's hormone pills on the table, along with various cigarette brands in the ashtray. Kang-ho then wrapped them up and gave them to his colleagues for testing. With many years of experience in handling cases, his intuition told him that the truth behind the butterfly murder case was definitely related to Mina and Jang Dong-gun. Kang-ho immediately went to see the doctor named Mina. Kang-ho questioned why Mina dared to lie. Seeing that Mina was determined to keep silent, Kang-ho told what he had investigated. Jang Dong-gun was the suspect in the butterfly murderer case, because on the day the victim Sunny was murdered, all the surrounding surveillance cameras were destroyed by Jang Dong-gun's younger brother, Yoo Hwin. Kang-ho said a series of words to scare Mina. The purpose was to expose Mina. Kang-ho said that he was collecting evidence to arrest Jang Dong-gun and Yoo Hwin. Kang-ho then advised Mina that if she could contact Jang Dong-gun and Yoo Hwin, she should tell them to turn themselves in, so as not to make things worse. At the same time, Teddy Jung was sitting sadly in the park. However, there was a young man who was even sadder than Teddy Jung, because he had failed the interview 98 times. Thinking back to his glorious past, Teddy Jung was once a notorious gangster. However, Tae-sung kept sarcastically telling Teddy Jung that the era of fists was over. Now was the era of money and power, and the one who had them was Prosecutor Kim. Hearing this, Teddy Jung went to make a deal with Prosecutor Kim. Teddy Jung said that he would retire and go to jail instead of Kang-soo. Prosecutor Kim also agreed without hesitation. However, Kang-soo was not grateful to Teddy Jung at all. Remembering the three brothers' dream of opening a red bar, Teddy Jung fulfilled that dream after being released from prison. Teddy Jung also recruited 2 loyal juniors to work for him. He had thought that the 2 juniors had left when Teddy Jung said to disband the team, but they were still happily working. This made Teddy Jung happy again. On this side, Moo-young brought the murder video back. However, Moo-young did not rush to report to the police, but wanted to post the exclusive news herself first. Attracting views and causing sales to skyrocket, Moo-young's whole team would also be promoted, so everyone agreed. Afterwards, the subordinates went with Moo-young to meet another worker, using food as bait to entice the worker to tell the truth. After just a few drinks, the worker was slightly drunk and told everything that happened that year. The next morning, while Tae-sung was opening a new construction site, Moo-young deliberately revealed her whereabouts. Then, Moo-young intentionally revealed information about a witness in the Kang-soo case to Tae-sung's subordinate. Then, Moo-young pretended to go meet the witness. After the 2 underlings overheard, they reported it to Tae-sung. Seeing that the plan had succeeded, Moo-young and the witness deliberately talked on the street. The person Tae-sung sent also caught up behind. Afterwards, Moo-young and the witness were taken into a car and taken to an abandoned warehouse. Moo-young asked asked the witness if he had seen Tae-sung on the day of Kang-soo's murder. The witness immediately confirmed it. Unexpectedly, Tae-sung not only did not panic, but even laughed as if he was teasing Moo-young. The cunning Tae-sung had already known all of Moo-young's tricks. Tae-sung immediately removed the hidden camera in Moo-young's glasses. Afterwards, all the camera devices on Moo-young were also found and destroyed. After that, Tae-sung ordered his men to deal with Moo-young and the witness. At this time, Moo-young used her ultimate move, only to see Moo-young suddenly roar loudly, making Tae-sung extremely confused, not knowing if it was the sound of a horse calling or the sound of fire calling, only to see immediately Tae-jung appeared in time. Although his face was covered in wounds, no one showed any fear. This time, Tae-jung brought asthma inhaler. In no time, Tae-jung cleaned up the thugs. After the thugs ran away, Moo-young took out the camera hidden in the witness's pocket, so Moo-young had the key evidence. At the same time, Mina couldn't stand Kang-ho's threats, so she went to the police station with Yoo-hyun to turn herself in. Kang-ho thought Yoo-hyun would tell the whole truth, but unexpectedly, Yoo-hyun only admitted to destroying the surveillance cameras. After that, Yoo-hyun also denied helping his older brother Jang Dong-gun kill someone. Yoo-hyun also repeatedly confirmed that Jang Dong-gun was dead, so Jang Dong-gun couldn't be the murderer in the butterfly murderer case. After that, Yoo-hyun also provided an alibi for the day Sunny was murdered. Mina said that Yoo-hyun was at the internet cafe when the crime happened, and the camera also clearly recorded that it was only 8 o'clock. Kang-ho still didn't believe it and thought that Mina and Yoo-hyun were fabricating evidence. Although Kang-ho knew that there must be something fishy about this, he couldn't find any solid evidence. After Takwon returned to the base, everyone happily wished Takwon a happy birthday. Kang-ho even surprised him by putting a cake on Takwon's face. After the party ended, the group started searching for the culprit. Moo-young was in charge of creating a media stir by broadcasting Tae-sung's wiretap from yesterday on TV. That would cause Tae-sung and Prosecutor Kim to turn against each other. The police immediately came to investigate Tae-sung. The media started to get into an uproar. Realizing that the situation was not good, Tae-sung went to beg Prosecutor Kim to save his life. However, Prosecutor Kim only saw Tae-sung as a pawn, and when his time was up, he would just throw Tae-sung away. Seeing this, Tae-sung jumped up and demanded to drag Prosecutor Kim down with him. After that, Tae-sung went to see Moo-young. Tae-sung agreed to cooperate with Moo-young to eliminate Prosecutor Kim on the condition that Moo-young had to help Tae-sung escape. Moo-young of course agreed to this sweet deal. At the same time, when comparing the photos, Kang-ho also discovered that Dr. Mina seemed a bit strange, so Kang-ho went to the hospital to see Mina. There, Kang-ho gave the results of the DNA analysis. Based on the cigarette sample at Jang Dong-gun's house, Kang-ho tested it and found that the DNA on it matched Mina's. The DNA even matched Jang Dong-gun's, proving that the suspect Jang Dong-gun was still alive and right in front of Kang-ho. Based on the photo, Kang-ho also discovered that Jang Dong-gun had changed gender. Kang-ho then pulled off the bandage that was wrapped around Mina's hand. On it appeared a deep bite mark caused by the victim Sunny. It turned out that the victim Sunny knew that Jang Dong-gun had changed gender. Therefore, Mina eliminated this threat. Mina was also the butterfly murderer. The 4 victims that Mina killed were all Mina's former patients. The victims all knew that Mina had changed gender because she didn't want anyone to know about her past. Mina killed the victims. When the truth was revealed, Mina also went crazy. Thus, the difficult butterfly murder case was solved. Mickey was finally exonerated. At night, Tae-sung was planning to escape to Cambodia. However, Tae-jung's group had already blocked him in order to avenge Kang-soo. On the other side, Prosecutor Kim was still talking on TV. Surprisingly, the screen showed the scene of the worker being killed in the past, not the worker having an occupational accident. As Prosecutor Kim had said, Prosecutor Kim's face was even clearly recorded. Immediately after that, the police came to take Prosecutor Kim away. So it was 2 birds with 1 stone. Moo-young took advantage of the evidence Tae-sung gave her, successfully arrested both the bad guys, and also cleared Kang-soo after several years of unjust imprisonment. After the case was over, Kang-ho and his mother came to visit Kang-ho's late father. It turned out that Kang-ho's late father was the legendary Ma Dong-so. No wonder Kang-soo's personality was just like that. The next day, Pan-seok's daughter Ga-eun didn't come home after school. Pan-seok didn't dare to scold her because he loved his daughter so much. At this time, Kang-ho went to the bald old man's house. However, the door that was usually open was tightly closed. It turned out that the bald old man was at the place where Ga-eun's group was having snacks. The bald old man even generously bought more things for Ga-eun's group. The bald old man said that he didn't have any children, so he cared a lot about the kids. Hearing that, no one seemed to suspect anything. However, Ga-eun had a feeling that something was wrong, so when she left, Ga-eun separated from her friends to see if her guess was correct. Sure enough, the bald old man's target was Ga-eun. Out of fear, Ga-eun walked home faster, but when they reached a turn, someone suddenly took Ga-eun away. When the bald old man arrived, there was no one to be seen. At home, Pan-seok kept texting to ask about his daughter. Pan-seok even personally cooked Ga-eun's favorite soup. However, Pan-seok waited for a long time without receiving a reply. At night, someone quietly dragged a black bag down the drain. At the police station, those who solved the case were promoted. Kang-ho was also promoted to lieutenant. Seeing Seeing that the atmosphere was a bit gloomy, Kang-ho immediately invited everyone to eat. At the same time, at the TV station, Moo-young was constantly arguing with her opponent. The two sides started betting on whose newspaper would get more viewers. Just when things got tense, Teddy Jung suddenly called everyone over. Teddy Jung held a party to treat everyone after a tiring day. On this occasion, Takwon also sold the skin cream he invented. At this time, Kang-ho suddenly gave out bonuses for everyone's efforts. Each large lump of money made everyone's eyes sparkle. However, before Kang-ho could be happy, he received a report. A body in a black bag was found in the sewer. When he arrived, Kang-ho had a hard time identifying the method of crime because the manhole cover was very heavy. The staff here also had a hard time opening the manhole cover. Kang-ho could only call Pan-seok to examine the body. At first glance, Pan-seok discovered that the victim had not been beaten. However, there were blood stains under the victim's fingernails. Pan-seok decided to perform an autopsy to examine further. After that, Pan-seok also took the victim for a brain scan to see if there were any abnormalities. After finishing work, Pan-seok returned home to look for his daughter, but Pan-seok still couldn't find Ga-eun. Ga-eun also didn't answer his phone. Pan-seok was so worried that his face turned pale. At the same time, Kang-ho came to warn the bald old man not to go wandering around. The next morning, the head teacher contacted Pan-seok to inform him that Ga-eun had missed many days of school. At the same time, the head teacher also reminded that Ga-eun often hung out with runaways. Hearing this, Pan-seok was very angry and wanted to text Ga-eun to scold her, but then Pan-seok managed to calm down. Fortunately, Ga-eun responded via text message. Ga-eun said she would go home for dinner tonight. This made Pan-seok feel a little more secure. At the same time, Moo-young also received a report that there was a group of kids running away from home, so Moo-young was planning to report on the case of this group of kids running away. At the same time, at the headquarters, Dae-jin was extremely sad. Kang-ho immediately went to ask. It turned out that the body under the manhole cover was Dae-jin's best friend, but this case was taken by another team. Seeing this, Dae-jin was very angry and argued with the team leader. But in the end, nothing changed because the team leader was afraid that Dae-jin would be affected by his feelings in the investigation. The team leader insisted on handing this case over to another team. At this time, a young man came to report that he was beaten and robbed, but Dae-jin didn't care. Right now, Dae-jin only cared about his best friend's case. Soon after, Dae-jin went to his best friend's house to investigate. Recalling the past, Dae-jin was also often bullied. Poor weak children like Dae-jin could not fight back. They could only lie there and endure it every day. Back in reality, the landlord reported that Dae-jin's best friend had left a few months ago. Having no other choice, Dae-jin went to the hospital to ask Jae-min directly if Jae-min was still bullying Ki-woong and if Ki-woong's death had anything to do with Jae-min, because Ki-woong's body was hidden in the manhole cover of the hospital where Jae-min was working. After that, Dae-jin said he would find solid evidence. Hearing that, Jae-min was not only not afraid but also coldly left. On this side, Moo-young was interviewing the kids. If they revealed useful information, Moo-young would treat the kids to a big meal. Sure enough, this method worked. A kid started to confess that there was a very cruel Oni demon. Oni had a tattoo on his right hand. Those who frequently ran away from home would mostly be subjugated by Oni. If anyone dared to leave the organization, Oni would be dealt with. Not long after, Moo-young received a distress message saying that Oni was hunting him down and wanted to kill him. At night, Pan-seok waited for Ga-eun to return, but she didn't. Pan-seok began to feel danger. Immediately after, Pan-seok rushed to the police station to report her missing, but what he got in return was the indifference of the police. The police thought that Ga-eun was running away with some friends. When she ran out of money, she would come back. Unable to accept this, Pan-seok returned to find Ga-eun's laptop. After that, Pan-seok contacted Ga-eun's friends one by one, but none of the kids were willing to help Pan-seok. Suddenly, someone texted Pan-seok to meet the next day. There, they would tell Pan-seok about Ga-eun's whereabouts. The next morning, Kang-ho was assigned to several robberies in the city. However, the perpetrators were underage children, so Kang-ho looked at cameras around the area to investigate. Unexpectedly, the perpetrators were very smart, always committing crimes in the blind spots of the cameras. The next morning, Pan-seok went to the meeting place with a stranger. Surprisingly, the other party was Moo-young. Recognizing an acquaintance, Moo-young took Pan-seok to Takwon's place. With Takwon's analytical skills, Takwon indeed noticed something unusual. On this side, Kang-ho also went to the robbery scene to investigate. There, Kang-ho recognized the way of culprit's movements. Suddenly, several hikers ran over in panic, reporting that there was a body buried underground on the hill. The body was still wearing Pan-seok's daughter's bracelet. At the same time, the police also found the murder weapon, a knife. Soon after, Pan-seok also rushed to the scene. Standing in front of the body believed to be his daughter, Pan-seok's hands and feet trembled with fear. Pan-seok personally performed an autopsy on the victim and speculated that the victim had been murdered no more than 2 days ago. The victim's body was covered in bruises. All of his bones were broken. There was also a stab wound in his abdomen. A stab wound in the abdomen was not the main cause of death, but why would the killer want to stab him in the stomach? Moreover, the murderer only stabbed him once. Furthermore, the murderer deliberately left the murder weapon at the scene. Because the victim was a minor, there were no identifying fingerprints. The victim's face was also beaten to the point of being disfigured. figured, to confirm the victim's identity, the only way to do so was to reconstruct the face. Based on the shape of the skeleton, the computer then confirmed the victim's identity. But when the results came out, Pan Seok was scared to death. The victim this time was Mutek, the only friend Ga-eun had brought home. Ga-eun was also dating Mutek. Mutek didn't seem like a bad person, so Pan Seok didn't object. While Mu-young was scrolling through Ga-eun's personal page and looking at the comments on Ga-eun's posts, Mu-young accidentally saw a group that appeared many times. Mu-young suddenly remembered the kids who had told Mu-young about this. There was a rumor that a group of juveniles called the Demon Group existed. Their leader Oni arranged for members to kill people in rotation. Oni had said that this was meant to strengthen their unity. Any member who expressed a desire to leave the group would be killed. At the climax, Mu-young's troublesome younger brother came to ask for money. Feeling embarrassed, Mu-young quickly pulled her younger brother downstairs. Having no other choice, Mu-young gave him some pocket money to avoid further trouble. Meanwhile, Kang-ho had followed Ga-eun's path and was surprised to see the bald old man lurking around. The bald old man was even following Ga-eun suspiciously. At this point, Kang-ho angrily rushed over to confront him. However, the bald old man calmly answered. He explained that his route to buy medicine had simply coincided with Ga-eun's, but when he noticed that Ga-eun seemed frightened, he followed him to ask what was wrong. However, when they reached a fork in the road, Ga-eun had suddenly disappeared. The bald old man also reminded Kang-ho of something. When a ferocious beast chased its prey, it would not do so blindly. Instead, it would find a place to hide or lure the prey to a predetermined location, increasing its chances of success. Listening to this, Kang-ho realized that the bald old man was telling the truth. Moving deeper inside, Kang-ho discovered a new trail. Sure enough, following this path would allow someone to avoid the sight of most cameras. However, Kang-ho still discovered a security camera recording. When he extracted the footage, he found that the killer always used an umbrella when going out. They were all dressed in black. Only this young man was wearing a striking blue shirt. At the same time, Mu-young also arrived at the prison. Mu-young interviewed a victim who had been extorted for money by Oni. Unexpectedly, the victim who had been extorted for money had also been left with a scar on his stomach by Oni. No one dared to reveal Oni's true whereabouts. Therefore, this victim confessed in order to hide in prison, avoiding the vicious pursuit of Oni. Next was the story of an old man selling kimbap on the street. The old man was once a victim of the Oni organization. While returning home at night, the old man was unfortunately extorted for money. Oni cruelly ordered his juniors to deal with the old man. Although he was in great pain, luckily, the old man survived. While in a coma, the old man could still hear their conversation. Oni was whispering to the juniors who had just attacked the old man to consider him as his father. Didn't he really want to kill his father? That terrifying voice sounded like a devil. Until now, the old man is still haunted and cannot forget. On this side, Pan Seok is still trying to find Ga-eun's whereabouts. Pan Seok made an appointment to meet each of Ga-eun's closest friends to ask questions. But in the end, Pan Seok still did not get any useful information. At the same time, Ga-eun's whereabouts were also revealed. Ga-eun was being held in a dark place somewhere. The Oni sitting opposite was taunting Gun. The next morning, on the way to investigate, Kang-ho discovered that his subordinate Dae-jin had fallen asleep at the hospital. Dae-jin was still trying to find justice for his late best friend. Kang-ho received a call from the forensic team. The body found under a manhole cover near the hospital and the body on the mountainside had DNA test results. Unexpectedly, the two victims were siblings. The case became more and more confusing. At night, Kang-ho received a report of a money extortion case. Kang-ho rushed to the scene to deal with the brats. Unexpectedly, the one being bullied was Tak-won. At first, the brats relied on their numbers to act recklessly. However, Kang-ho did not give the brats any face. After a few basic punches, the brats were beaten to a pulp. A few minutes later, Teddy Jung's group also rushed in to deal with the remaining brats. Very quickly, the whole group was brought into Kang-ho's car. After that, Kang-ho led the whole group back to the headquarters. Seeing that there were so many people, the team leader made things difficult for them. However, Kang-ho still insisted that he would handle everything. Sure enough, with just a few pieces of fragrant fried chicken, the whole group sat down obediently. Suddenly, Kang-ho discovered that there was a suspicious person in the group because the green shirt he was wearing was very similar to the shirt of the child holding an umbrella in the camera the day before. Seeing this, Kang-ho dragged him into the interrogation room. The child in the blue shirt was named Sung-guk. Because of his youthful recklessness, Sung-guk deeply regretted what he had done. Afterwards, Kang-ho asked where Oni was. Hearing this, Sung-guk was very scared and did not dare to say anything. But under Kang-ho's persuasion, Sung-guk finally agreed to help. Sung-guk began to tell the story. The mastermind was a man nicknamed Oni. No one could contact Oni. Normally, Oni would initiate contact with them, and the way Oni contacted others was also very mysterious. Oni would post images of demons on certain designated websites, and these things were all stolen. There was only one way to meet Oni, buying the things that Oni sold. After that, Oni would specify the location, and the buyer only needed to go there to receive the goods. At this time, Oni posted a new message online. Kang-ho decided to use Sung-guk as bait to lure Oni out. In the middle of the night, Sung-guk stood in the square, acting as bait. However, Oni had seen through the plan long before. Not long after, Sung-guk received a message. Oni had known that that Sunguk was working with the police, he spoke slowly but acted quickly. A man on a motorcycle suddenly sped straight toward Sunguk. Sensing something was wrong, Kang-ho rushed out to save him. Seeing that Oni was about to escape, Dae-jin ran forward to stop the vehicle. Unexpectedly, Dae-jin accidentally locked eyes with a familiar gaze. But before he could react, Oni pulled out a dagger and stabbed him. Dae-jin was immediately rushed to the emergency room. Afterward, Kang-ho brought the videotape of Oni back to the base and joined forces with everyone to track him down. The police began suspecting Ga-eun as the culprit. Upon hearing this, Pan-seok became furious. Moo-young also sided with Pan-seok, putting Kang-ho in a difficult position, as Ga-eun was still missing and had no alibi. Not long after, Moo-young brought the interviews of Oni's victims to Tak-won. After watching them, Tak-won realized something was off. By marking the movement patterns of the Oni organization, Tak-won was able to pinpoint the hideout of this sinister group. Soon after, Moo-young asked Tae-jung's group to come and fight. This was a slum for runaway children, but after searching for a long time, they still couldn't find anyone suspicious. At the same time, Pan-seok took Ga-eun's fingerprints from the computer that Ga-eun often used, then compared them with the murder weapon. The result shocked Pan-seok to the point of having a heart attack. The fingerprints of both of them were incredibly similar. Pan-seok couldn't believe it. Could it be that Pan-seok's daughter was really the murderer? At this time, Moo-young also found a suspicious place. When she entered, she found Ga-eun locked up, but Ga-eun looked like she was afraid of something. At the same time, when Dae-jin woke up, he confirmed to Kang-ho that Oni was Jaemin, the one who bullied his classmates in high school. Sure enough, Jaemin now appeared in front of Moo-young and Ga-eun. Ga-eun angrily rushed forward to stab Jaemin, but with just a little strength, Jaemin controlled Moo-young and Ga-eun. Luckily, Moo-young was quick and escaped. However, Moo-young was blocked by a group of Jaemin's juniors. Luckily, Tae-jung's team broke down the door and rushed in coolly. These brats with milky mouths were no different from ants in Tae-jung's team's eyes. Each one was easily defeated. Even Jaemin was no match for Tae-jung, but Jaemin was very quick and cunning. Jaemin took the opportunity to trick Tae-jung and got on the car to escape. Jaemin's gang was then thrown into prison by Kang-ho. The team leader got angry and started fighting as soon as he saw them. A bunch of kids dared to do illegal things. Seeing that the ringleader Jaemin had not been caught, the team leader seemed displeased. But then, the team leader let Kang-ho continue to handle it. Kang-ho interrogated each kid, but none of them confessed anything. They were all loyal to their boss, especially when they showed him the photo of the victim who was killed on the mountain. The kids boldly said that Oni was not the murderer, but Ga-eun was the one who did it. After hearing that, Kang-ho immediately widened his eyes. On the other side, Pan-seok heard that his daughter had been rescued, so Pan-seok rushed to the hospital to find Ga-eun. Seeing Ga-eun still unconscious on the hospital bed, Pan-seok had not yet felt relieved when he was tormented by the results of the examination. Pan-seok absolutely did not believe that his daughter was the murderer. At this point, Pan-seok's memories of his wife flooded back to his mind. Before, Pan-seok's wife had been seriously ill and about to die, but because of his busy work, Pan-seok had been unable to be by her side to take care of her. Even when his wife died, Pan-seok was not by her side. Ga-eun felt resentment towards her father when she saw this. Looking at his wife's body for the last time, Pan-seok could only cry in guilt. The only reason for Pan-seok to continue living was Ga-eun. A few minutes later, Kang-ho also came to the hospital to visit Ga-eun. At the same time, Kang-ho wanted to confirm whether Ga-eun was the culprit or not. Knowing Kang-ho's purpose, Pan-seok was very scared. Pan-seok asked everyone to listen to Ga-eun's explanation, because Pan-seok believed that Ga-eun would never do such a thing. According to Ga-eun, her boyfriend, Moo-taek, was also a member of the Oni organization. However, because of his good nature, Moo-taek wanted to turn back. This was discovered by Oni, so Oni kidnapped Ga-eun and locked her in a cell. Next to her was Moo-taek, who was being brutally beaten. It was possible that Moo-taek's shoe was still at the scene. At night, the colleagues constantly urged Moo-young to post about the Oni organization, but Moo-young, with the upright instincts, never posted half-hearted news without proof. So, Moo-young promised to personally find Oni before officially posting to the media. At the same time, Kang-ho returned to the scene. Sure enough, Ga-eun's testimony was true. Moo-taek's blood-stained shoe was still at the scene. After that, Kang-ho visited Dae-jin. Until then, Dae-jin still couldn't recover completely. So, Kang-ho had to feed Dae-jin piece by piece. At the headquarters, the kids kept making a mess in the cell. This made the team leader furious. When Kang-ho returned and saw this, he used the trick of baiting a few kids first in order to create jealousy in the others to get information. After that, Kang-ho brought the pile of documents to Tak-won to analyze. As expected, asking Tak-won was the right thing to do. Based on the detailed information that Tak-won deduced, Kang-ho narrowed down Jaemin's hiding place. At night, Jaemin went around bewitching the kids to become his subordinates. With his pickpocketing skills and unmatched cruelty, the homeless kids were easily subdued by Jaemin. On this side, Moo-young also went to the hospital to interview the female students who had been kidnapped by Jaemin. Looking at the pitiful faces of the female students, Moo-young felt extremely sorry. At the same time, in order to find Jaemin's specific whereabouts, Kang-ho and Moo-young had to seek help from Tae-jung. Sure enough, Tae-jung only had to call out once, and all of his juniors would show up. Tae-jung's juniors came from all walks of life and all professions in society. society. After being treated to a decent meal, Teddy Jung's juniors split up and took action that night. Sure enough, Jaemin was discovered not long after. Everyone immediately chased Jaemin like a rabbit. Then, they forced Jaemin into a small alley that the camera couldn't reach. Kanho had only one purpose in doing so, which was to beat up this scumbag Jaemin. Seeing that there was only one lowly police officer, Jaemin confidently pulled out a knife and sarcastically said, "Who would have thought that his mouth would bring disaster to his life?" Kanho immediately started punching and kicking. He thought the boss Oni was formidable. Who would have thought that after just a few basic punches, Jaemin would faint? Gaon also brought an important piece of information. That is, the kids just needed to be given a bunch of coupons, and they would naturally listen to him. Immediately after, a bunch of coupons were brought into the cell. Behind the coupons were messages from the victims. Realizing that they had gone down the wrong path, the kids were very remorseful and cooperated to confess all of Oni's crimes. Because of that, Kanho had enough evidence to put Oni in jail. When everything was over, Gaon went to her father's workplace. Looking back on the difficult times, Pan Silk and his daughter hugged each other. Gaon also promised to listen to her father from now on. On this side, because his deceased friend had no relatives, Daejin held a funeral for his best friend alone. Unexpectedly, Kanho's group came to comfort him afterwards. At the same time, Teddy Jung also brought food to cheer Daejin up. The night had just passed peacefully. The next day, a new case was discovered. Kanho discovered a very familiar method of committing the crime. 15 years ago, when he first started working, just seeing a corpse made Kanho vomit. That was also the first case that Kanho was in charge of. As a rookie, Kanho was very enthusiastic about taking on everything. This case was a serial case that still had no culprit found. The victims were all cut with a square piece of cloth. There were some very savage cuts on it. The murderer must have toyed with the victims until they died. In the most recent case, a little girl was lucky to survive. After being sent to a mental hospital, she was deformed. She even imagined being tortured and screamed loudly to herself. On this side, while following the clues provided by another police officer, Kangho went to a small house in an alley. This was also the first time Kangho met the bald old man. No matter how he looked at it, Kangho still didn't believe that the bald old man was the murderer. Because with that little old man's strength, what could he do? However, when checking each photo of the serial cases, Kangho discovered that the bald old man was always present at the scene. If the bald old man was not the murderer, then he must have been involved in the case. So dozens of police officers came to search the bald old man's house. In the bathroom, Kangho suddenly saw a bloodstain on the wall. Because of that, Kangho brought the bald old man back for questioning. Under Kangho's questioning, the bald old man was bewildered and did not understand anything. A few minutes later, the results of the bloodstain test came out. It turned out that it was blood caused by the bald old man's wife's pneumonia. Feeling ashamed, Kangho personally drove the bald old man home. But on the way back, the bald old man asked to get off the bus first. At the same time, the bald old man left a note reminding him of the lucky girl who survived the day before. Seeing the bald old man's cold gaze, Kangho immediately ran straight to the hospital to check. But when he got there, the girl was nowhere to be found. Coincidentally, Kangho met the bald old man getting medicine there. Suspicion arose, and Kangho followed the bald old man to question him. But because there was no evidence, Kangho had no choice but to let it go. Afterwards, Kangho went to the girl's house to ask her what happened. Unfortunately, the landlord informed him that the girl and her daughter had moved away, so Kangho had no choice but to return to the headquarters to continue the investigation. Kangho spent the whole night checking each videotape. When morning came, Kangho discovered that what the bald old man said was a lie. It was clear that the victim had gone to the bald old man's shoe repair shop. But when Kangho arrived, the bald old man thought that the bald old man was old. How could he remember so many female customers? Seeing that calm expression, Kangho angrily dragged the bald old man out. This immediately caused a huge public outcry, and Kangho was suspended for 3 months. However, Kangho was determined not to give up, and that was why he had been going to the bald old man's shoe repair shop to warn him for the past few years. Back in the present, the team leader still didn't believe Kangho, thinking that an old man couldn't possibly commit a crime. Before he could finish speaking, the whole team was summoned to greet the new public security chief. At the same time, Muyong was being reprimanded for not being able to increase the viewership ratings recently, and the director even gave Muyong's chance to someone else. This made Muyong went crazy, and Muyong then got rid of her bad luck by inviting the whole team to eat chicken. After eating, Muyong's group went to the scene to ask for an interview, but the enemy arrived one step ahead. The rule here was that only one representative group was allowed to enter a company. Therefore, Muyong came up with a plan to climb over the wall and break in. After that, Muyong used her mouth to complain to the police, and then started cleaning everywhere to please the cleaners. Finally, someone agreed to be interviewed by Muyong. According to the witness, when the delivery was made, there was clearly someone inside, and it seemed like the voice of an old man. With little information, Muyong couldn't find any clues, and other colleagues also started to give their opinions. That room was sealed off at all exits, so how did the murderer sneak in? In the end, Muyong's group decided to go there to investigate, but unfortunately, their conversation was overheard by their enemies outside. At this time, Pan Sok and Tak Won also went to Teddy Jung to relieve their boredom, and suddenly the employees became upset with Takwon. It was because the skincare products Takwon sold had caused the employees to have red rashes all over their bodies. The next morning, Mu Young went to interview the landlord. The landlord said that he hadn't seen the old man outside for a long time, so he went up to check if anything was wrong. Unexpectedly, when he entered, his body was lying cold on the floor. At the same time, the enemy also started reporting on the case that Mu Young was working on, which was no different from stealing someone else's bread and butter. At night, Kanho went to the old man's crime scene, but Kanho discovered that someone had broken in. While Kanho was about to teach the intruder a lesson, luckily, the room's lights turned on in time to reveal Mu Young's face. Seeing this, Kanho was extremely angry that Mu Young dared to sneak in here without permission. Therefore, Kanho immediately chased Mu Young's group out. Having lost all the thorns in his eyes, Kanho began to freely search the room. At the same time, Mu Young also received a strange phone call. The other party said that he was the culprit, even sending a video of him torturing an old woman as evidence. At the same time, Kanho also found a secret passage behind the closet, so Kanho called the forensic team to examine it. A few minutes later, Mu Young met Takwon to ask for help. When looking through the video that the murderer had sent, Takwon realized that the way the hands were tied was strange. It was very similar to some previous cases. The murderer's purpose in approaching Mu Young was to force him to stop investigating this case. At the same time, the police were checking the camera and discovered that the murderer had dragged a black suitcase before committing the crime. To investigate further, Kang-ho led his colleagues to search the scene. Here, a fool kept blocking Kang-ho's actions, and upon looking at him, Kang-ho realized that the fool was the adopted son of the bald old man. After that, Daejin also found the suspicious black suitcase. Immediately, Kang-ho went to the bald old man's house. He threw his most precious pair of shoes to the bald old man, asking him to clean them because Kang-ho would wear them to put him in jail. The next morning, Mu Young negotiated with the superiors that she had a plan to lure the murderer out. That night, Mu Young went on TV and put forward provocative theories. However, after waiting for a long time and receiving no contact from the murderer, Mu Young went to Takwon for help, then went to Pan-seok to invite him to join the team. Because he had been in contact with corpse for more than 180 minutes a day, Pan-seok's face always looked like a ghost. Next, Mu Young went to persuade Teddy Jung's team to help. The next morning, the suitcase's forensic results showed that it only contained a hair sample from the bald old man's wife, and there was nothing else suspicious. Seeing that the clues were gradually reaching a dead end, Kang-ho once again went to the crime scene to investigate, but it seemed that Kang-ho was not very welcome here. Fortunately, following Daejin's instructions, Kang-ho really found Jung-ha's house. Jung-ha was also the lucky girl who had survived 15 years ago. Upon seeing Kang-ho, Jung-ha's mother was so angry that she cried. Why did Kang-ho come back after so many years? Jung-ha's family had been suffering in hiding for so many years, but under Kang-ho's sincere pleading, Jung-ha's mother agreed to talk to Kang-ho. However, when Kang-ho brought Jung-ha the photo of the bald old man, Jung-ha went crazy and cried. The haunting memories of that day still haunted Jung-ha. Seeing this, Jung-ha's mother quickly chased Kang-ho out. Jung-ha's mother asked Kang-ho not to bother Jung-ha anymore. Kang-ho felt guilty and gave Jung-ha's mother some money as encouragement and then left. At this time, the new public security chief was constantly showing off his power to his juniors. The public security chief was just sitting back and enjoying the benefits of being promoted, but he kept cursing his subordinates. This made all the subordinate police very angry. Later, Kang-ho returned with a pile of files. Then, Kang-ho asked Daejin to carefully review each one to find clues. At first, Daejin wanted to refuse to do this, but then, Daejin was exposed by Kang-ho. Making 100 calls to his girlfriend must have been very patient. Seeing this, everyone turned around and laughed at Daejin. On this side, Mu Young's group was having a meeting. Pan-seok said that when examining a screw at the scene, it was clear that the screw came from a large factory, but there were many large factories in the area, so Takwon showed off his talent for narrowing down the culprit. After that, Mu Young and Teddy Jung went to the scene to investigate. The factory owner thought Teddy Jung was a criminal police officer at first glance. Mu Young saw that and quickly acted it out to the factory owner. That's why Mu Young quickly gathered information from the factory owner. On the way back, Mu Young and Teddy Jung unexpectedly discovered a very familiar knot. It was the method used by the murderer. According to the testimony of the people around, the owner of this knot was Tae-in. Tae-in was also the air conditioner repairman that Mu Young had met by chance before. At this time, at the headquarters, Kang-ho also discovered a clue. Following the camera footage he had just collected, Kang-ho asked the technology team to sharpen it. If so, the face of the murderer might be revealed. At the same time, Takwon and Pan-seok also approached the suspect's house. These two guys looked smart on the outside, but their actions were as naive as children. When they sneaked into the suspect's house, Takwon and Pan-seok started to search everywhere for clues. However, unfortunately, Tae-in appeared in front of them. Seeing an intruder, Tae-in seemed to understand everything. Without saying much, Tae-in closed the door, intending to eliminate Takwon and Pan-seok. Pan-seok bragged about being a special agent, but with just one punch, Pan-seok's face turned pale. Seeing that, Takwon quickly sat down and raised his hands to surrender. After controlling Takwon and Pan-seok, so, Taein pulled out a knife and intended to kill them. Seeing that, Takwon and Pansok immediately fell into panic and trembled. Fortunately, Taejong's men came to the rescue in time, but Taein was not an ordinary person. Very quickly, Taein knocked down the two rescuers. In a dangerous situation, fortunately, Taejong appeared, daring to touch Taejong's men. This really made Taejong angry. Very quickly, Taein was in Taejong's hands. Unexpectedly, this Taein was really a madman. Above all, Taein's thinking was also very distorted. Taein said that killing the elderly was doing justice to the heavens, because the elderly could no longer contribute anything to society. Hearing that, Taejong was angry and was about to do something, but was stopped by Mu Young. According to what Taein blurted out, there were still two other murderers. At the same time, the technology team also finished sharpening the video of the culprit. When looking at it, Kang Ho recognized this idiot. Soon after, Jung-ha was announced dead. Jung-ha's mother kept crying in pain. Jung-ha's family had a hard time escaping, but since Kang Ho came, Jung-ha died tragically. It turned out that when Jung-ha's mother had just gone out, the idiot with a scary face had arrived. Hearing the noise, Jung-ha thought her mother had returned, so Jung-ha gently opened the door. However, there was a scary figure outside. The idiot brutally smashed the window and entered, only see that when coming out that the idiot stuffed Jung-ha into a sack and put her in the car. In the car, the bald old man's face gradually appeared. At the scene, Kang Ho also discovered the bald old man. Kang Ho immediately chased after him, but lost his trace. However, Daejin located the idiot's location. The idiot was doing something in the suburbs. Seeing this, Daejin and Kang Ho hurriedly got in the car and chased after him. When they arrived, they found the idiot trying to destroy the evidence. Daejin angrily kicked the idiot down. Afterwards, Kang Ho brought the evidence back for forensic testing. Sure enough, the blood stains on it were found to be Jung-ha's. At this time, Mu Young's group was locking Taein in the bank. Despite such disgusting torture, Taein was not afraid at all. Out of options, Mu Young stuffed Taein into a bag. Then, she sent Taein to the police station. The media also started reporting on this. The public security chief was also praised for this. He thought that Mu Young had agreed to drop the case, so he handed it over to the police. Unexpectedly, Mu Young had another card up his sleeve. That was the videotape recording Taein saying that he had an accomplice. At the same time, in the interrogation room, Kang Ho kept showing the victim's photos to question him. Looking at the photos, the idiot completely nodded and confessed that he was the culprit. But when he showed the photo of the bald old man to question him, Taein was scared and hid in a corner. Upon hearing the news, the public security chief immediately came to scold Kang Ho. The public security chief said that once the idiot was caught, it was over. Now, they shouldn't make any more trouble and let the public report it. Otherwise, the public security chief wouldn't be promoted. Seeing this, Kang Ho got angry and quickly complained to the team leader. But the team leader had no other choice. That night, Mu Young posted the video of Taein's interrogation. At the same time, she also posted information about accomplices in the serial cases. This caused a sudden increase in views. The bald old man also looked at Mu Young's photo and started playing with the knife. The next morning, when the police learned that Mu Young had posted that Taein had an accomplice, they called and threatened to sue Mu Young's company, Swamper. The boss was helpless and let Mu Young handle everything himself. At this time, Daejin also informed Kang Ho about the accomplice. On this side, Mu Young went to the nursing home to visit the bald old man and his wife. Up to now, Mu Young still hadn't realized the danger, so Mu Young remained calm. Based on the bald old man and his wife's excellent acting, Mu Young quickly believed the bald old man and his wife. At night, Mu Young went to Teddy Jones to find Kang Ho. At this time, Kang Ho was investigating who the accomplice could be. While watching Mu Young's interrogation tape of Taein, Kang Ho also expressed his suspicions to the bald old man. After learning this, Mu Young was very panicked because Mu Young had just interviewed the bald old man. The next day, Kang Ho and Takwon visited Taein in prison. Under the influence of being released early, Taein was clearly shaken, so Taein revealed some useful information. A few years ago, Taein had discovered that every night an abandoned factory would make strange sounds. Taein had gone to see and had seen Jung-ha being forced to kill his friend. Next to her was the bald old man holding a box cutter. At this point, Taein laughed like crazy. Then, Taein returned to the prison. Pansok also began to make a hypothesis. Why did the idiot drag a large suitcase to the scene? Could it be that the suitcase contained the bald old man's wife? Not long after, the group gathered at the appointed place. They divided up to search the surrounding factory. At night, Kang Ho indeed heard a strange noise. Following the sound, Kang Ho broke the lock and rushed in. But suddenly, Kang Ho was knocked unconscious by someone in the dark. At this time, Mu Young also deduced that the cloth that the bald old man's wife often used was very similar to the pieces of cloth cut from the victims. At the same time, Kang Ho was tied to a chair. The real culprit began to come to light. It was this seemingly harmless old woman. The old woman was also the bald old man's wife. Seeing that Kang Ho was completely controlled, the old woman was very happy. Then, the old woman told him that before, she had ordered the bald old man to throw the box cutter and let Jung-ha choose. One was that Jung-ha kills his best friend. Two was that Jung-ha would be killed by the bald old man. Seeing that there was no way back, Jung-ha had attacked her best friend. That pain scared Jung-ha to the point of mental illness. However, the two old still looked very happy. Hearing that, Kang Ho got angry and cursed the two perverted old men. The bald old man couldn't stand it anymore and was about to attack. But at this moment, the police siren rang out, so the bald old man and his wife had to escape. However, it was just a fake siren made by Tak-won. When they got out, Kang-ho angrily chased after them. However, the bald old man and his wife quickly escaped. Teddy Jung's group also came to the scene, but it was too late. A few minutes later, the public security chief also came to the scene to examine it. But after the forensic team re-examined, they found no traces. That made the public security chief believe that Kang-ho was lying. After that, the public security chief scolded Kang-ho, saying that the killer Tae-in and the idiot had been caught, and Kang-ho should not cause any more trouble. The public security chief even thought that Kang-ho had hit himself in the head. Hearing this, Kang-ho was very upset and argued back, but all he received in return was complaints. A dozen reporters outside also made a fuss, so everyone stopped arguing and dispersed. When they returned to the base, Pansok gave Kang-ho first aid. The police couldn't help, now they could only rely on themselves. At the same time, looking at the camera, Pansok analyzed and determined that the old woman was the one who gave the main orders. The subordinates were the ones who did the killing. One of those subordinates was also the one who knocked Kang-ho out. The key here is why those strong young men are so loyal to the old woman. Because Kang-ho was suspended, Daejin had to go to Kang-ho's house to meet Kang-ho. Daejin showed him fake business evidence of the bald old man. Daejin also found out that the bald old man and his wife used to work together at the orphanage. Upon finding out the news, Moo-young and Tak-won went to the old orphanage director to ask him about it. At that time, the old woman had been a nurse, and the bald old man had been a janitor. They couldn't be husband and wife because of the huge difference in status. Going back more than 10 years, the boy had accidentally knocked over the old woman's things. On the surface, the old woman pretended to pity the child, but at night, the old woman personally sent the boy away. This happened to be seen by the bald old man, but the bald old man walked away as if he had seen nothing. While sweeping the trash, the bald old man accidentally cut his hand, but it seemed that the bald old man really liked the color of blood. Even the entire wall was painted red by the bald old man. That caused his superiors to curse and beat the bald old man. It turned out that the bald old man was colorblind and could only see the color red. However, one day, the director suddenly disappeared. The only source of aid was also cut off, causing the orphanage to no longer be able to raise the children. In the end, the orphanage had to close down. After hearing this, Moo-young immediately brought this information back to the base. Tak-won hypothesized that the bald old man had been psychologically manipulated by the old woman. The old woman coaxed the bald old man to repeatedly cut the director with a box cutter. Every drop of bright red blood that flowed out made the bald old man feel very happy. From then on, the bald old man was willing to follow the old woman's orders as long as the bald old man could play with the victim until death. At this moment, Kang-ho suddenly received a video. In it, countless people were captured and blatantly killed. Based on the images on the phone, Pansok suddenly discovered that this was a place Pansok had been to. As a doctor, Pansok had visited an orphanage. Now, that orphanage was abandoned. It was very likely that the bald old man and his wife were hiding there, so the group marched to the orphanage. When they arrived, they split up to search. Kang-ho didn't want Moo-young and Tak-won to be in danger, so Kang-ho told Moo-young and Tak-won to wait outside for police reinforcements, while Kang-ho went inside alone. Pansok and Teddy Jung went up the hill to check. Suddenly, Teddy Jung fell into a hole. Pansok had just finished tying his shoelaces when he looked up, not knowing what was happening, so Pansok also slipped and fell into the hole. Seeing that he couldn't climb up, Pansok leisurely lay down and looked at the night sky. Despite Teddy Jung's attempts to climb up, Pansok didn't react at all. Only then did Pansok feel scared when insects crawled around him. Pansok and Teddy Jung's screams also attracted others. He thought they were coming to save him. Unexpectedly, they were the old woman's subordinates. At that moment, the old woman was enjoying a sumptuous feast. Every time the time ran out, the old woman assigned the bald old man to kill one of them. At the moment of danger, Kang-ho arrived in time. Kang-ho agreed to raise his hands and surrender to save the hostages. However, it seemed that Kang-ho had been tricked. The people who seemed to be the victims turned out to be the old woman's subordinates. They had been raised in the four walls since childhood, so they could not distinguish right from wrong and could only obey the old woman's orders. Soon after, Moo-young and Tak-won were also dragged down. At this time, the old woman was wondering who to deal with first. Hearing this, Kang-ho begged to be killed first, but unexpectedly, the old woman had already decided to attack Tak-won first. Despite Kang-ho's attempts to stall for time while waiting for reinforcements, the old woman still brutally attacked Tak-won. With such a long cut, Tak-won collapsed in pain. Blood also began to flow profusely. At the same time, Pansok and Teddy Jung were being taken to the old woman's lair by the kids. Teddy Jung quickly swung his arms to escape the siege. He thought he could rush in to save Kang-ho's group. Unexpectedly, a group of people came from somewhere. Down here, Moo-young was still trying to stall for time so that Kang-ho could use a piece of beef bone to escape. But seeing Moo-young talking too much, the old woman went crazy. The old woman immediately rushed forward and frantically strangled Moo-young. Just as Moo-young was about to suffocate, Kang-ho managed to escape and stop her. The kids saw this and rushed forward to restrain Kang-ho. Kang-ho was struggling to defeat them one by one, but there were too many of them, and Kang-ho was also getting exhausted. exhausted. At this moment, Ponsuk and Teddy Jung also broke the door open. With everyone's help, the situation seemed to have improved a little. However, the number was still too large for them to stop. Fortunately, Teddy Jung's men also arrived in time to support, but before they could celebrate, another group of people rushed in from somewhere. The old women also took opportunity to run into the forest. Seeing that she had enjoyed enough of the fun, the old woman wanted the bald old man to finish her off, but the bald old man seemed to not dare to do so. Seeing this, the old woman cruelly used a knife to slash the bald old man. Then the old woman prepared to kill herself. Fortunately, Kanho rushed over and knocked the knife out of the old woman's hand. Mu Young also knocked the old woman out in time. Mu Young didn't want the bald old couple to leave peacefully like that. Not long after, the police arrived. Seeing Kanho's group coming out of the darkness looked very cool, but it didn't last long before they were startled by the dog. Although it was a bit awkward, they were still heroes. In the end, the real culprit of the serial cases was caught. The media also reported congratulations to the police. The whole headquarters was also applauding Kanho. Thanks to Kanho, the whole team was proud. At this time, the public security chief was also permanently suspended from work because the public security chief had wrongly convicted the wrong person and prevented Kanho from solving the case and saving people. After the movie, everyone gathered at Teddy Jung's to celebrate. Everyone happily recounted their glorious times, but the fun didn't last long. Kanho received a new serial case, so the Mad Dog Squad rushed to catch the criminals. The movie ends here. If you find it interesting, please support us with a like and a subscribe. See you again in the upcoming videos.